Okay, so the next tip is about fabrics. So back to our little shift dress, which I modified just a little bit. And we're going to go through, I'm going to delete these fabrics that were here that I was playing around with, and we're just going to use one fabric. So we're going to focus on left side to right so you can see the difference in the drape and see the difference in how the default fabric reacts differently, uh, or the fabric on the left reacts differently from the fabric on the right. So let's start with our default fabric, and I'll delete all the other fabrics. Now, adding a fabric is as simple as going to your fabric library and double clicking. So I'm going to just select a few different types of fabric that I know are kind of similar, but they react differently on the form. In the simulation, they react a little bit differently. And in the render, it will show up differently. So we're going to look at those few aspects really quickly. Thanks for joining my 10 tips. I'm sure you guys will like these shorter videos. So here we have a cotton voile, we have stretch sateen, we have angora, and we have a knit. So let's do left side to right side. I do make a little bit of a mistake here, and I add the fabric to alternate side. So hopefully we can get through that. But let's add one fabric here, and you'll see that it actually moved when I added the fabric. That means it's simulating a little bit differently on the left side than the right side. So if we want to hit our render button, we can kind of see it start to render a little differently. You can add the fabric piece by piece, or you can highlight the whole garment and add the fabric to the whole garment. So now you can see the default side is a little less with drag lines in the pattern, so it doesn't really show the drag lines or the fit issues with the pattern until you get it to a new fabrication. So I'm just going to show you guys the difference in the fabrication and the difference in how it responds on the form, on the 3D form. So with this fabrication, which is the stretch sateen, I made it pink so you could see that it enhances the stretchability of the fabric, which is actually going to add more drag lines. The more tension there is in the fabric, the more drag lines there will be. So now we're looking at a cotton voile, which is a little bit lighter weight, and it shows up a little bit more as a lightweight fabric. It kind of tends to rise up a little bit on the garment, and it kind of tends to show its differences again. So we see that the dart has more drag lines than it does in the default, and I left it like that on purpose because I'm going to show you how to get rid of some of the dart points. In Clo3D, the dart points don't come out as they do in real life, so you have to kind of manipulate it a little bit. So now we're on to our lightweight denim. So lightweight denim has a little bit more thickness to it, but it is still lightweight. So you can see the subtle differences from the default fabric to the lightweight denim. Again, the dart does show up a little bit more with a little bit more drag lines than the default fabric. So your default fabric is really going to give you the best case scenario of your fit. But when you change that fabric, know that you're changing it, the properties as well as the fit. So now let's go, I added angora to one side, and you can see that the angora actually doesn't show up in your 3D window, but it shows up as fur in your render window. So the properties actually come up as fur and as angora in your properties. So now some of the things that you can do is you can switch things around. You can switch your normal maps. You can add fabric textures in your fabric type. There's a drop down menu. You can add or change the type of fabric there. You can add different maps for different types of fabric. Say you want to have a knit map and you want it to actually come out as a shiny leather, but you want it to drape as a knit. You can go ahead and change those parameters and test it out in your render window. So here I'm testing velvet and satin finishes on a knit fleece jersey. So there is very subtle differences in the finish of the fabric for the render window, as well as the finish of the fabric for your drape in your 3D window. So you can go ahead and start to manipulate and say you want everything to fall as it does in your default fabric, meaning you don't want all the drag lines and everything to show up. You can change your maps. You can change your garment properties to finish in a certain way, and you can get that effect. So that's usually if you want it to render a certain way. If you want the flexibility of having, let's say, like we have here, a leather fabric that shows up like a knit with a knit map on top of it, and it's actually draping as a lambskin leather, so it is more stiff. When you go into your render window, you can see that the sheen that's there is actually a leather sheen, and that comes from your fabric finish in your fabric type drop down. And then your drape is actually a leather drape. So if I want to go ahead and change the drape of the fabric to, let's say, something lighter weight like a chiffon, you can see immediately in your 3D window when you start to render it, it changes the look, but it doesn't change the finish, it changes the way that it drapes. So now let's go and talk about real quickly about the darts. So let's get this garment to maybe change the fabric a little bit. When you want the fabric to drop down quicker, always use your simulate in GPU, and then you can go back to your regular simulation. But let's take out some of this fabric in the darts. So there's a steam tool in your 2D window toolbar. There's a steam tool, and you can click on that steam tool to show, to click on your dart points. It will eliminate some of the drag lines depending on where you click. So be very strategic because you can mess it up, and then you'll have to right click on your pattern piece and remove the steam. Now the steam will stay there if you change your fabric. So the steam doesn't go away when you change your fabric. But if you don't like how it's coming out steamed in that fabric, say you need the steam to be in different areas, you can go ahead and right click on your pattern piece with your steam tool selected. You'll right click and then you can remove the steam from that part and then re-add it to where you want it to be, or not. So that's how you use the steam tool. I use it for darts because it makes the darts look a little bit flatter and prettier, and then we can go into a nice little pose. And the reason I'm doing this pose is so that you can see the pose how it is in GPU simulation. It takes a little less time to simulate the garment, but now all of the steaming that I did in the previous pose comes out. So now I've got to remove the steam and then steam it to a way that I could like it in this pose. That's how steaming works. So you have to use it, you know, to your liking, but I think I only use it for darts because I like to make the dart points a little bit flatter, which Chloe doesn't do naturally. And then I kind of like to just use my fit techniques to get out the rest of the drag lines. And I think this is the end of this video, and I digress, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks. Tips in 10, guys. Okay, guys, this next bonus tip is save your work. I cannot tell you enough, when you start to make more complex garments and you start to move things around, add zippers and trims, you could potentially get a crash because sometimes you're doing a bit too much. But if you compose your work in such a way that you know, every time you do something fabulous like add a zipper, then you save your work. Get into the habit of saving your work. There is autosave, but the way designers usually work, we can move around so fast and add so many different bells and whistles to our garment, and that autosave does not always keep up. So my bonus tip to you is always save your work. I'm adding this zipper, I'm, doing a few movements of the garment, changing the pose. If that autosave has not kicked in yet, I need to save my work. Take care.